So, Professor Vania, I'm delighted to hand it over to you. You are going to chair our digital panel. We have just under 50 minutes, so off we go.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me, and hello everyone, and welcome to our session on the changing industrial landscape, realizing the digital and the data future. So many thanks for inviting me. I'm Professor Vania Sena. I'm based at the University of Sheffield, and I'm a member of the Productivity Insights Network. The network was established in January 2018 and is currently funded by the Economic and Social Research Council. As many of you probably are aware, the main goal as a network is to advance the current debate on productivity, both in theory and practice. And data and digital technologies are important to explain part of the productivity gap that we see in the UK. And indeed, the discussions with a number of our stakeholders have made clear that regional gaps in the use of digital technology can explain some of the productivity differentials among regions that we observe here in the UK. So in particular, as a network, we have identified digital skill shortages as the main barrier to business growth. It is therefore my pleasure to chair this session on the changing industrial landscape. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers, and more precisely, we have Marcus Robbins, Head of Strategy and Portfolio at Fujitsu. We have Chris Francis, Director of Government Relations at SAP, UK and Europe. Neil Impiazzi, Partnership Development Director at SEGRO. Hugh Thomas, Development Director at Magway. Becky Foreman, UK Corporate Affairs Director at Microsoft. And last but not least, Jonathan Aronson from University of Southern California. Before I hand over to Marcus, I have some housekeeping items. So if you have a question for any of our speakers, feel free to send them through the chat function, and we will be answering questions at the end of the session. Now, if we don't get to your question during today's webinar, we will collect them and send an answer anyway afterwards. Finally, we would like to encourage you to share today's webinar with your social network. So, without any further ado, I would like to kick things off by welcoming our first speaker. And our first speaker is Marcus Robbins from Fujitsu. And Marcus, you can help us setting the stage here. So can you tell us how you see the future changing in terms of digital innovation? And how can the local businesses respond to the challenges?
Sure, thank you, Vania. I think it's going to be an interesting time, and I think one of the things, if we keep a very strong focus now on Heathrow, West London area, we can see that there's a great opportunity now for a reset. Conditions have changed incredibly over the last 9 or 10 months. And in many ways, that gives everybody the opportunity to take a little pause, to take a step back, and to look at almost everything in a new light, to look at everything they do in terms of their practices, policies, procedures, business models, etc., in a very, very different way. And I think one of the things that we're certainly seeing it around the globe with some of our customers, is the concept now that these, what is often referred to as ecosystems, if you take West London, Thames Valley as an example, can actually merge into something that we're calling digital arenas. And digital arenas are those clusters of business who are working towards a common objective, if you like, in order to work symbiotically together to provide something into the community or into the environment, which leads us into the concept of, rather than mobility as a service, which is talked about more, I think mobility as a service is far too constraining, but we talk a lot about travelers. And I think what we're really talking about is more of a transportation digital arena, or a transportation focused digital arena. Now, one of the key tenets behind one of these digital arenas is, of course, that everything is enabled by digital technology, but particularly is powered by data. And if what that means, underpinning this, this digital arena is effectively a data and information ecosystem. And we can see that the advances in the availability of data, the ability to store, manage, and analyze data can provide a great opportunity for ecosystem players or partners in this digital arena to work with each other, work with each other's data. An ecosystem is comprised of consumers, it's comprised of producers, consumers of data, producers of data, and decomposers, which is the same as any ecosystem in nature. And what's key is that people within the ecosystem can fulfill different roles at different times and can play at different layers in the ecosystem, which is very unlike the natural ecosystem. So, for example, if we took a starting point with some data from Heathrow, Heathrow would be able to provide traveler data, be able to provide transportation and passenger data out into the ecosystem. That would allow other members to use that data to augment and then provide further information, but particularly allow them to build products and services around that service the travelers much better because of the insights they're able to get from that data. But then equally, those organizations can augment the data themselves. And Heathrow, as another member of the ecosystem, talking about everybody assuming different levels at different times, can also benefit from the enhanced data that is provided by those ecosystem members. So in many ways, it's a self-sustaining model. And of course, the main winners from it are the travelers who get much better tailored services, who get much better tailored products, and get a much better tailored experience because of the insights into their traveling experiences that is provided by that data. And of course, that creates more opportunities for more ecosystem players to come into the environment. Many of the barriers to entry into a business arena now are significantly lowered by the advent of data and digital. Whereas in the past, you had to have a decent amount of capital, you had to have presence. We know from our experience of using this today that we do not need to have presence to interact with each other, and we don't need to have presence to interact with customers and consumers. So again, another aspect of digital is the ability to lower the barriers to entry and allow more players to play a part in that digital ecosystem, in that transportation digital arena.
Okay, thank you very much, Marcos. It was actually very interesting. And we probably have to move to Chris, who works for a company which is a big player in data ecosystem. Chris, you work for SAP. SAP is almost an household name in the digital world. We use SAP at Sheffield, actually. Can you tell us how SAP seeks to transform industries and grow economies? What do you think of the business digital divide, and how should we address it?
Well, I think the divide is really important and key. I mean, first of all, welcome and thank you for the opportunity to speak. I mean, it's worth just rowing back and looking at what digital is for in the general element. We sell productivity. We sell productivity through a mix of communication, collaboration, agility, efficiency, and effectiveness. And we can see coming forward the next generation of productivity tools. Digital approaches, AI, analytics, machine learning, real-time visualization, digital twins, distributed ledger technologies, and they're all wrapped up currently in the hype word of your choice for your game of buzzword bingo: Internet of Things, Edge of Network, Fourth Industrial Revolution, and so on. And that's where the innovators are playing, and that's great. And that's where we need to look at the sort of data ecosystems arrangements that Marcus was talking about, and that's absolutely right. The issues come that they all build on what Gartner have termed the digital foundation. These are already dependent on having today's tools in place before you can use the data you've collected to play with AI, before you can plug in a business-to-business collaboration tool. You actually need the automated processes in your own organizations, and in some cases between them. And we need to look at that from the fact that the UK is already having a productivity crisis. The productivity has been flat since 2008, well before the pandemic and the dreaded B word. And that tells us a story when we look underneath what's going on in the UK. The UK has been brilliant at consumer adoption. It's been therefore brilliant at business to consumer adoption and digital transformation and everything that touches, including travel and logistics. But underneath that, actually, the UK is the reverse of what many people expect. It's bottom quadrant in its use of internal use of technology for business processes inside businesses. We're about 20% in penetration in the UK. EU average is about 40%. EU leaders are about 60%. And it's probably one of the reasons we do have this productivity gap. So we have a tech adoption and skills issue, and we need to look at accessing and understanding of digital and upgrading the skills at pretty much every level. It's not just retraining people to use AI, it's how these things will evolve and affect their normal working day. Probably most pressing, absolutely new applicants to the workforce, but actually the existing workforce. And you know, what do we need on some of that? You already heard Heathrow talking about the need to reform apprenticeships. Absolutely agree. We need a modernised tax incentive system. We need apprenticeships at all levels, everything from base to graduate level. We need the ability to deploy those as sectors and ecosystems. We need short form skills upgrades. You know, we've got plenty of numerate graduates, but it doesn't take too much to change a numerate graduate. It takes an awful lot to create a new numerate graduate. Now, mostly those aren't really issues for the people on this call. They aren't really an issue for the fast innovators. Yes, we all need better skills, but we're already on a call. We're already digitally enabled to the point in we can join in with this. It's the people in your ecosystems that aren't. It's reaching out to the sectors, supply chains, ecosystems, and that's why actually transport hubs are such an important part and vector for digital transformation, because as we've heard throughout, they touch every other part of the economy and other economies elsewhere. So if we can tap into spreading best practice through supply chains and ecosystems using things like the transport hubs, we have a much better attempt to not only upgrade the local regional issues, but also spread that out to the rest of the country as well.
Thank you very much, Chris. That was very, very interesting. I have now a question for Neil. And Neil, I think the question that I have for you is about space, because we think of digital technology, digital revolution, and we seem to assume that space doesn't matter any longer, but it's really the opposite, isn't it? And what I really would like to understand, what do you see as the opportunities or challenges to bringing forward a new space for new products? And in particular, I mean, I know that space is key to your industry, and presumably you have some expectation about what the innovation district can do. And I wonder whether you could tell us what you would like to see from an innovation district. Neil, you muted.
Okay. Thank you, Vania. Yeah, great question. I'll probably go in reverse order, really. I think, you know, from our perspective, our expectations on an innovation district, you know, is this creation and commercialization of new ideas, and picking up on what Chris was saying around that ability to share best practice across supply chains. So we are an industrial developer. We have customers ranging from Brompton Bike to Ocado, Rolls-Royce to British Airways, John Lewis. So we are supporting a range of sectors right across that West London economy, which are absolutely critical to servicing the needs of communities and businesses. And many of those are driven by innovation. The challenge I suppose they're facing is, how do you keep pace with innovation, and how do you adopt those practices in a way that enhances productivity while still supporting the sustainability and the environment. So what we're looking for is really, I suppose we could argue that West London's never been really starved of innovation. We've got proximity to world-class universities, global corporations, research institutes and high-tech startups. But I suppose the challenge is, how do you put this innovation right at the heart of the region? right with businesses, not just businesses, but education, civil society, the public sector, and importantly, our communities, and how that contributes to productivity. So we really need to make innovation more visible, more accessible, and I suppose really importantly, if we do want a truly productive region, is to make sure we bring the most deprived parts of the region with us, and we don't leave communities behind. I think that's really, really critical. So I think what were our expectations really of an innovation district is it's more of a strategy than where businesses, the public sector, private sector, civic sector, comes together under a really strong leadership. And that collective approach is we have a shared goal. I think that's absolutely critical. In terms of creating the space, that's one of the challenges. There isn't space, and that's a real big issue in West London, that there is limited brownfield space to bring forward, industrial development or create communities where businesses can come together. And I suppose what we would be also seeking from Innovation District is how you create that vibrant space. And that may be looking at ways that you repurpose existing space and bring it back into use. You co-locate different use classes like industrial and housing. So you think more creatively and innovatively around spatial planning. And of course, multi-story. We've built a multi-story industrial unit in Paris, in Gennevilliers. So actually thinking innovatively, creatively around the built environment, again, to create the right space for businesses, communities, and other partners to come together to collaborate.
Thank you very much, Neil. And I have now a question for you. Can you tell us a bit about the key digital innovation that Magway has embraced over recent years? And how do you think they could change what we do today?
I think that's a great question after the three previous speakers, because there you heard real deep insights into the digital realities, the changes, and then the physical realities, maybe the constraints, and how do those two come together? And Magway, we are a physical thing. We physically move goods, but we do it by enabling really the revolution in digital practices. And what I'm often struck by is the extraordinary pace of change in terms of automation, digital, but also digital enabling physical, so robots. And you see that in the warehouses that Amazon, Ocado, all of the major retailers, logistics firms are building. That ability to pick things, identify things digitally, create really deep inventories, and then get them to people in a phenomenally short period of time now. So we really sit in that place, because you talk about what is happening in those factories and warehouses, the automation. I think there was a previous point that we don't take it all the way through, and it all goes wrong in the loading bay. All of that automation stops when those goods get put into a metal rolly cage with a wonky wheel and pushed into the back of an HGV to trundle down the motorways, to get held up in traffic, to belch out fumes, to hand over to white vans that will come to our door. What we're doing at Magway is enabling a different way of doing that, really continuing the automation. And that's powered by really fundamental changes in industry. The growth of power electronics, the strength of permanent magnets, the power in industrial PCs, and the communication technologies that are being enabled. So we can see right into a warehouse, and we can carry individual goods to the closest point for a final mile delivery for someone using zero carbon means. We're entirely powered by electricity. And if there is a digital revolution, there is an electrical revolution. And what I think that we offer to the Innovation District and our plans in West London to create a network is a different way of thinking about how digital enables transactions. If you've got a system like that working, what's the role of the smart contract? What is the role of distributed ledger technologies, the ability for the individual to engage with a large corporate? What happens when you start talking about the sharing economy and you're using a network where people can put things in as well as take things out? Things can be traded internally within that network, or the circular economy where things are recycled. Or, you know, I have an ear open for a driver coming to collect something that I got from Amazon that's broken. How do I return it to get it fixed? If I could walk up and drop that off, that's a whole new approach to logistics. And from the work we're doing, talking to people like e-cargo bike companies, that the revolution in transport is also a revolution in social interaction. Because cargo bike riders are starting to take on the mantle around the world of being community players, because they have a face, they're easy to connect with. So how do these new networks begin to enable a different kind of society, not only a different kind of retail environment? How do they enable productivity by linking distributed high-value, smart manufacturing capabilities in Industry 4.0? And then critically, how do they address environmental issues so that we can really begin to tackle the problems we've got, not only with carbon, but with air pollution?
Thank you very much to you for your very helpful comments, very insightful. And I have now a question for Becky. And Becky, from your vantage point as Director for Corporate Affairs at Microsoft, how do you think digital innovation might further change the workplace? What do you think businesses need to raise to this challenge?
Thank you very much, Vania, and thank you for inviting me to take part in this panel today. As Vania said, I'm the UK Corporate Affairs Director for Microsoft. Microsoft employs more than 3,000 people in the UK, and our HQ is right in the heart of the Thames Valley in Reading. So this whole West London area is a very important geography for us. We also sell through more than 25,000 partner companies who are based right across the UK. So we do have a perspective beyond the Southeast as well. And before I start speaking, I also just want to acknowledge that the pandemic that we're all going through has been, I think, a personal tragedy for many people through either bereavement or redundancy and business failure. And when we talk about the big picture of economic recovery, I think it's important we also remember that there are individuals impacted behind those headlines. At Microsoft, we believe it's hugely important that the efficiency and the productivity gains that we've seen brought about by increased digitization during the pandemic don't slide backwards as we emerge out of it. And where parts of the economy can work flexibly, we want to see them continue to do so and be encouraged to do so. Business culture here is so important. I think boardroom and management teams are now convinced that working from home or working flexibly doesn't equate to a duvet day, as it was once called, where people don't do anything at all. And people can and do work effectively in this way. And we anticipate that this phenomenon will continue even as business travel re-emerges and becomes something that we're doing again. Organizations have had to adjust radically to manage by outcome rather than activity, further driving accountability, focusing management intervention. And in addition, flexible working allows organizations to draw talent from a far wider catchment area. This allows areas that were previously overlooked by recruiters to become significantly more economically active, bringing revenue and nurturing those services that workers demand for effectiveness, including flexible working hubs, retail, and leisure. And we observe that public cloud services have underpinned this rapid move to flexible working. They've continued to embrace these services. They are driving new levels of organizational productivity and data-driven business opportunities. And we would really like to see government bring forward more tax incentives for investments in cloud computing, similar to those that they signalled in their manifesto in 2019. This would really incentivize and support companies to drive the economy of the future. As an economy, we also need to optimize for innovation and growth. And as other speakers have pointed out already, the number of digitally skilled workers that we need to take advantage of the technologies around the corner aren't there at the moment. And those skills are required in all areas of the economy. IT departments need specialist technical skills to build new technologies into workplace environments. Those already in the workforce need to be able to have the skills to take advantage of AI and other technologies to make them more productive. And underserved communities need digital skills to ensure that no one in the workforce is left behind in the march of progress. And we've at Microsoft seen the huge benefits to the technology sector in the UK of apprenticeships. The Microsoft Partnership Apprenticeship Programme has seen some 20,000 completions now amongst our partners right across the UK. And the government's financial support for salary subsidy for apprentices, potentially focused on key priority sectors, is a huge potential for marrying investment with skills development, focusing on emerging generations of workers and those retraining, and indirect investment in business. Additionally, there may well be economic benefits derived from adjusting the rules around the levy spend, and as someone else has already said, ensuring that pots of unspent levy are released as capital injection, or there is more flexibility around how that levy is used. Data is one of the hidden benefits of digitization. It helps organizations to understand more about their operations and their organizations, and it can develop deeper management insights to drive productivity further and drive it faster. Data offers a huge opportunity in solving major social and economic challenges. The economies that succeed in the coming years will be the ones that learn how to effectively use data and driven technologies like AI. However, data and the capability to use it are currently concentrated in a too small number of companies. And at Microsoft, we would like to ensure that every organization and every country is able to access the immense benefits of data and its related technologies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your insightful comments. And Jonathan, it's now your turn. And we have heard about space, we have heard about disruption, data ecosystem. And so what do you think about data ecosystem and disruption and the connection between the two concepts? And I know that you work in a faculty of communication, and obviously, I mean, most of the communication now is remote. So do you have any insight on how communication and communication links will support the digital innovation, disruption, and the development of these data ecosystems?
Thank you so much, Vania. It's a pleasure to be here. This is the second panel that looks at two different drivers. We've already looked at green and carbonization in the other factor. This is much more about digitalization. And I'd like to sort of divide my statement a little bit. I'm drawing from a book that I did with Professor Peter Cowie, and I'll put the link in the chat. The basic point is there are lots of disruptions going on. It's not a single disruption. There are information disruptions, the cheap revolution, which makes it much easier for new companies to form, to create, to innovate. Broadband, which allows for big data. Modularity, we can plug in new kinds of innovations in different places, as well as AI and machine learning. We also have what we call the production disruption, which is changing industries. We've had 3D printing. We've had smart materials, we've had sensors, and we've had robotics, all of which are changing the way companies operate and have to operate. All industries, and I really stress all industries, are being challenged to innovate. It is every industry around Heathrow. I sometimes make the point that beyond that, if you look at industries from mining where you're going to be using drones, not miners. Agriculture, where you are hooked directly from your tractor to satellites, providing data, and even dairy cows, where they are part of the Internet of Things, allowing companies to increase productivity of milk cows by 50%. If those are changing and adopting as rapidly, I think that the challenge for every firm in every sector is to think deeply and rapidly on how your sector and how your company is going to adapt. Because if it doesn't adapt, it's not going to make it in the long term. And what we've heard today in this conversation is we are at the beginning of a process. It is absolutely critical that we continue this conversation, that the West London Heathrow district innovation be something that is the focus of this. Let me take the second point very briefly, and I am cognizant that we all want to get on to the questions. I thought that John Holland Kay made some really excellent points before. For Heathrow and the environs of Heathrow to thrive, it is a competition that requires links. One of the things we know is the traffic patterns in the future are going to be quite different than they are today. We've all become very used to Zoom. The idea of short meetings that you fly into London and then you fly back at the end of the day for a European conference are probably never going to be quite the same. Zoom works pretty well. What is going to come back is the long haul flights. So I think it is extraordinarily important that Heathrow concentrate on those long haul flights, because its competition is Paris and Frankfurt. Those are the main ones. Heathrow has only one major hub, is the only major hub in England, in Britain. So it is critical that it start linking to a number of places. Senator Durbin represents Chicago. US, unlike Britain, has set many different ports of entry. So I'm obviously prejudiced. So I would like to see Heathrow LAX links being very good. And of course, the East Coast hubs and Miami as well are very important. The point that Mr. Holland Kay made, which I think is very important, we have to look, Britain has to look at better long-haul connections with India and China. In India, Mumbai and Delhi are critical. It is a fast-growing area. In China, there are at least three that have to be dealt with: Beijing, Shanghai, and the rapidly growing area of Shenzhen, which is next to Hong Kong. So in order to open it up to questions, because we have about 15 minutes left, let me turn that back then to Vania, and thank all of you for your participation and interest.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. And I think we can open for a couple of questions. So I don't know if the panelists have been able to enter the chat, and we do have a couple of questions, and Chris has tried to answer them already. And basically, there is a question from Andrew, based at West London Business, that he asked what might a local program to drive digital upskilling and adoption in the Heathrow transport ecosystem look like. And I wonder whether any other panelists besides Chris could tell us what are the views about a potential local program to drive digital upskilling and adoption. Any views?
I can't talk in detail, but I would hazard a guess at the sort of framework I think that we would need to be looking at. It's really clear that when you're skilling people for jobs, it's hugely important that you're skilling them for the jobs that both are going to exist in the area in which they live, but also the jobs that are still going to exist in 10 years' time or 15 years' time. And so I think it's hugely important that these type of initiatives are a partnership between local businesses, local authorities, central government, and also those who provide the training, so further education or higher education institutions. We've seen, a huge amount of digitization, and so I think the way we should be really innovative in the way in which that type of training is delivered. And at Microsoft, we have, it has been observed that it was a shame that with so many people put onto furlough, it wasn't possible to create a very rapid way of upskilling those people who were on furlough over the summer through some kind of at-home online course. So I think the partnership that's really important is got to be central to how we create any type of upskilling program for people already in the workforce.
Okay.
Can I add to that? Because I noticed in the chat it says to help Neil's occupiers as well. So I feel watching. I think there's two areas here, and I will pick up on Becky's point around the upskilling. So the first thing is around if you look at our customer base, we probably represent 10, 15, 20 different sectors, across West London. This is film and studios, online retailing, e-commerce, manufacturing. I suppose the question to ask is really how can working with innovation partners, we bring some of those sectors together as businesses to look at sharing best practice across. So how can we learn from different sectors? So you take it from a kind of a vertical learning sector, into that horizontal. That's I suppose the point that we're hoping to get out of an innovation district. How can others learn? How can we learn from each other? And the second, the upskilling, I do think there is a role for businesses here, and certainly from the real estate is to inspire that next generation of young people and try to expose them not just to digital, but how that impacts in the business environment and how we prepare those young people for the world of work. They are using digital technology all the time, but I suppose it's trying to get them to understand how that is implemented into the world of work. So I think to answer one of Andrew's is that businesses coming together, engaging with schools in a series of programs, I would see as a good outcome, really, as part of that upskilling and making sure for me it's about inspiring those young people, because that, particularly if they live in an area of deprivation, that's a great kind of hope for them to get a job, with some of these great companies that are on this panel. Thank you.
So make a point that will build on Neil's point. I think one of the things that we've been observing a lot recently is, given that the pace of change of digital technology is so fast, we might need to start to see an emphasis on going back to what increasingly seems to be a four-letter word, which is work. And Neil mentioned it, is that people actually go to work to do work. And I think there needs to be more emphasis, and certainly from a higher education perspective, on working with suppliers like ourselves, like Microsoft, like SAP, and all of the other large and small technology vendors to help people learn technology in the context of doing digitally enabled jobs, which is what the future of work is. So whilst there is some value to a large extent in educating people generically about technology and technologies, and there's a lot of time spent on talking about how wonderful it will be when this technology does that and that technology does that, and that's all well and good, but I think you have to contextualize it in order for people to be truly effective. And there's been a number of correct comments made about the productivity issues that the UK is facing and the fact that productivity has stagnated since 2008. Then the only way that we're going to break out of that cycle is through digitally enabled jobs and through teaching people their jobs in a digitally enabled way and the embedding of technology into both.
And I second all that. I just want to add one little thing, if I may. One of the things we mustn't do is put people off who aren't they're not a numerical graduate. We're not trying to retrain them at data lists. It's also the fact that if somebody is we're not going to have automated trucks probably without people on them going around the streets, but you are likely to see that person become a customer engagement person, looking after and making sure it's the right package, taking back feedback, taking back the returns. They're going to turn from a driver into somebody that's actually relating to your customer, for example. Their tools will be digital. They'll have to use it. They'll be digitally enabled, but it's a change in role. So some of it is this is what I think is actually the existing workforce is so important in this, but we mustn't give the message that you've got to be some sort of graduate mathematician retraining as data analyst. Yes, that's important for lots of big companies. We need more of those, but it's also about everybody throughout the supply chain and throughout the economy, because as we're seeing today, this is reaching into our homes. It's reaching into the way we spend our day at work, and that's affecting everybody. So absolutely, those kind of things at the top level, all the innovation, driving the innovation is important. The UK is actually, historically very good at that. We need to do that. We need to do more of it and push our strengths, but we also need to tackle some of those other elements much better than we've done in the past as well, I think.
Let me add
on that point, if I may. I think that's a really good point. It's we don't really know what the new jobs will be, and it's the innovation that's going to create the opportunities. And that point about what happens when you don't have to be a driver anymore, but you're going to be something else. That's an extraordinarily rich area for young people to innovate. For them to think about how do they want their world to work and where are the new opportunities. So I think it's as much about encouraging entrepreneurship and for all of us to listen to the ideas that young people have got, because we'll find value in there, be able to support them, and they will create those new jobs. We don't know what they are yet, but they're the ones that are most likely to uncover them.
Thank you very much.
Let me add something, if I may. It's not only new jobs, but it's also the change of older jobs. When ATMs were first introduced into banks, there was a great fear that this was going to cause unemployment among tellers. In fact, tellers were retrained, and there are now more tellers doing more things and more interesting things than there were before. And I suspect that this will happen in industry after industry.
Thank you very much. I got one last question. Probably it's more of a reflection, and I suspect that probably Jonathan and myself may be the best person to answer this question, which is really about universities and how they cope with the digital revolution. And Jonathan, I don't know if you have any thought about it. It is true that there is a difference between the tools that now we have become used to use, like Zoom and Teams and all the others, and basically the mechanism and the tools that academics traditionally use for assessment and midterm papers and so on. So should we rethink the way we train our academics? Should they be retrained in the use of digital technologies?
The answer is yes, but let me also say that COVID has caused all of us to become better at Zoom than we were. I think that you're going to find university teaching is going to change in fundamental ways afterwards. What we've discovered is it is much easier to do small seminars online, that we can give more attention to people, and it works really excellently. What we're also seeing, though, is that for larger classes, there are innovative possibilities. For instance, I'm teaching a class with Lord Eatwell this spring. He's going to be in England. I'm going to be in the United States, and we're going to have 30 or so speakers, not for an hour and a half, but to drop in for 30 minutes. Seema, you're on notice. You're coming among others, but she knew that already. So that the universities are all struggling for this. We've had thousands of years where you could always tell a schoolroom from the picture. Now, what is happening is we're actually inventing new ways to teach. We're seeing what works and what doesn't. And Vania, I'd throw it back to you to answer. Hello, Seema.
Okay, thank you very much to all our panelists. It has been a very interesting discussion, and I think we can go back to the main session. Thank you very much.